Hey everybody, we're officially going live with Brian here in a couple minutes, but I figured I'd jump on early, let people see that I'm going live, that I'm doing a live video, say hi to everybody who's jumping on. But yeah, I'm really excited. Brian's a friend of mine. I interviewed him on the podcast as well, and he has a book coming out this September and is doing a lot of great work in allyship and fighting against Christian nationalism. So we love it. We love it. We love it. We love it. So, oh my God, hi. Just saying hello to everyone. I am waiting for Brian's little invite here to be on the live. If you are not Brian, I will not be putting you on the live because I will get confused. Very excited to see everybody. Thanks for jumping on. It's been, right, little space buns. It's been a couple weeks of news and some heavy stuff. I'm hoping that we can really just dive into some topics today and do some healing and conversations. That one of the good things I think about the rise of Christian nationalism right now is that the masks are off and they're not pretending to be good or moral or legal or care about the Constitution anymore. They're just being who they actually are, and we're getting to see it, and we're finally getting to have a lot of really hard conversations that before were pretty taboo or that people didn't feel comfortable asking questions around, and now we're in a situation where we're being forced to have those conversations. And so I think that's one of the good things about what's going on right now, and that's something I'm very thankful for, because this movement will break, the fever will break, and they are going to lose their power once and for all because they've exposed themselves for who they actually are. And if you do have questions, I'm going to bring Brian on right now. You can already start sending those questions. Let's see. I think it worked. Come on, buddy. Try again. There we go. There you are.
Oh,
What's up,
hi.
dude? Just life. How's life going right now?
Hi, Monty. Doing okay. Congratulations. This is like a semi-celebratory moment, right?
Yeah, so this is actually part of
One?
my Celebrating a Million
What? A
series.
million?
I know.
In the rearview mirror, a million. 1.5. How about them
So
apples?
now, like, okay, now I have to start planning, for number two. But yeah, so that's what this is for, is just, and also just bringing on my friends and people that I love. Brian and I were just talking about, I sent him, before my platform ever blew up, I sent him an email, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years
Yeah.
ago?
So like 2 years ago, it's funny. I was looking for your email address the other day because I was like, I wanted to email you. I think actually an early copy of my book, and I was like, I probably have your email. And when I searched your name, an old email popped up from before you really had much of an online presence, where yeah, like 2 years ago. And you shared your story, and I had replied, but I didn't make the connection because this was a while. I didn't make the connection to you, but I was glad I replied though, that I wasn't like rude to your your email.
Right? Because and I would have understood because I was like, oh, he has a big platform, but I had forgotten too. And so I was like, oh yeah, I did like reach out to you because it was a step for me, like seeing all these creators start to show up and really talk about leaving fundamentalism and how that changed lives and having these conversations around gay rights. And you were one of the first creators I saw like in the deconstruction space, and so that was a cool little tidbit that I had forgotten about too.
Yeah,
um
it's been really cool watching kind of from the beginning of your growth, and I'm really proud of the kind of content you put out. I think it's so important. I think you're really, really fucking good at it, and so much deserved. So congratulations. I
well,
hope that
thank you.
you
Thank
feel the
you.
weight of that, and yeah, it's like a huge accomplishment. So
Yeah, it's all the
happy to
rage. I
you.
just output all the rage and it turns my brain into high gear. So it's like the gym, rage posting, and research is,
Yes, you're
is
so
kind of
good at
my
rage
life.
though. I had somebody reply to me when I mentioned that we were doing a live together. They they were like, "Oh, this is so great because you are the gentle fatherly spirit that I love, and she is the feminine rage that I need." And I was like, "Well, first of all, I think that's beautiful, but I didn't even know that I strike people as gentle and fatherly. I see you being feminine rage big time, but in like a righteous anger, like a flipping tables kind of way,
Yes.
obviously, right?"
Yes. It's definitely a flipping tables anger of like, I've had enough of this, so much evil and so much harm being done in the name of Christ and in the name of like goodness. So I'm like, no, we're not doing that right now. Not gonna do it. Just And it's been my whole life. I mean, you grew up in it too because you grew up IFB, which is
Yes.
so like I
Yes.
tell everybody kind of give the background of what
Yeah.
that is for people who aren't familiar
So
with
there's different
IFB.
kinds of fundamental Baptists, like for instance, Goddard. I think that is a branch of fundamental Baptist that has nothing to do with me. So I was not in the Goddard world. I was in the Bob Jones University world. So I went to Bob Jones University, which is where my dad went. My mom and my dad met at Bob Jones University, and they basically told me that they wanted me to go there. I had been homeschooled in like a bubble up until I went to Bob Jones. So that was like my whole world was IFB. No, yeah, no Christian rock even. So like what I like to like kind of tell people to anchor them in my weird kind of Christian experience is that Stephen Curtis Chapman was too liberal for my world. And Liberty University was seen as like they were like left. They were like so progressive compared to us. We saw them as it's a slippery slope once you go to Liberty.
Exactly. Well, and that was one of the things that, even at Liberty, so Liberty was more liberal than what I had grown up in. But
Okay.
we also like at Liberty would be like, man, Bob Jones is like, like people would either say, oh, they're doing it right and Liberty needs to step up their game, or there were
Oh
people that were like,
my.
those people are fucking like
Right.
they're in it. They're in it.
So I didn't realize until I was just so ignorant in so many ways of what I grew up in, and I was only able to see it clearly when I got a little distance from it. And like it was incredibly racist. Like Bob Jones had interracial dating ban until the year 2000. So they made the news a little bit in that time because George W. Bush spoke there, and he received a lot of rightful criticism because they still had an interracial dating ban in 2000 when George Bush spoke there, which is nuts. Um, but so for me, my first deconstruction was exiting fundamentalism, IFB world, and kind of becoming a normal ass evangelical. So that to me felt like, I mean, going to a church with a drum set felt like that was my first rebellion. That was
Like,
like,
woo!
you boy, they had a blacklist of churches at Bob Jones. You weren't allowed to go to churches that, yeah, had like rock and roll basically. And
Wow.
so for me, I was incredibly moved by evangelicalism when I first encountered it because I was used to every week was legalism. It was all rules based. All the preaching was fire and brimstone, and it was do.
Do
And-
do.
but, but when I went to an evangelical church that was what would you call like the gospel centered
Yep.
evangelical church? So I don't know if you're familiar with like the Gospel Coalition or Tim Keller. Those were like my boys. And
Yep.
so
I've
Tim
read a lot
Keller's
of
whole
Tim Keller's
thing
work.
was his whole thing was like, it's not about what you have to do, it's about what Jesus has already done, which was really helpful for me at the time because I only had a religion about what I was supposed to do. And so, kind of discovering grace, making it about Jesus were really big light bulb moments that made me fall in love with evangelicalism because it was such a breath of fresh air compared to fundamentalism. And I went all in. And I think I would have continued to evolve and deconstruct things had I not gotten just incredibly involved in evangelicalism to the point where after a few years, I became a pastor at a multi site church. Um, and so, yeah, that's how I became a pastor. I was like so bought into the evangelical vision for the gospel because it was such a good contrast to, I think, the fundamentalist vision that it
Yep.
took me some years to really see the dark side of evangelicalism and to see it for what it was.
And and we talk about this if you guys want to go to my podcast, Flipping Tables, we have a whole interview. But what was kind of the turning moments where you were like, oh, I can't do this anymore?
I think it's probably the same moment that I think a lot of people are having right now, except in 2015, Trump's sort of first rise to power within the Christian right, where they aligned with him. I just didn't see that coming, and that just shows how blind I was, how ignorant I was, that I was surprised by that. And it really felt like major dissonance from what I thought I was a part of. But it really was just me being able to now see this thing clearly, because actually that's exactly who they were. It was a mask off moment. And so for me, it was that recognition like, oh, this is our guy because this is who we are.
Yep.
And so yeah, that was when I first started to see myself as a bit of an outsider within the movement, but I still wanted to kind of work for good from within. And so I stayed pastoring from that time when I first kind of had that like shift till 2020 when ultimately during COVID was I think the pause that I needed to kind of be a little bit more in touch with myself and recognize that I can't exist anymore in this space. That my presence within it, I thought I was doing good by pushing back from within. And for those of you who are still in it, I think that your voice matters as long as you can stomach that. Like that's your calling, great. But I got to the point where I realized that I was doing more harm than good because my very presence in that institution was legitimizing it. It was basically putting my stamp of approval, saying this is a good thing. And I actually began to realize, no, this is a bad thing that we're doing.
Yeah.
And so I need to go.
Well, and that's one thing I realized too, like the further I got into deconstruction was that I like any participation that I was giving it was like adding credence to it, especially when 2016 I had been deconstructing for 3 years prior to 2016. But when Trump showed up on the scene, and I'm watching all these people that told me like character matters in the White House and adultery is one of the worst sins you can commit. And like, especially my dad was like, had this thing about adultery. Like it
Same.
infuriated him. And it didn't,
Did
I
you
will
get the
say
Bill
too,
Clinton talk from your
oh,
dad?
I got the bill. He
Yeah,
made me write a letter to Bill Clinton when I was 9,
I'm dead.
addressing his behavior and abortion. Yeah. So he like made me write him a letter.
I did not write a
No, I
letter, but I
wasn't
did
9. I
learn what a
was,
blowjob was from because
well,
of
and I
that
didn't
in my
understand what he
kitchen.
had done. My dad just told me, character matters. Blah, blah, blah. And I was 6. Yeah. So I had no idea. All I remember is that I got a letter back from the White House, like just a generic stamp, but I got a letter back from the White House. But it
You
was like this
told
whole, I
him.
didn't understand. So all these people that are so caught up in this morality in the White House and, we need a Christian leader. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like,
Right.
really? And I was already suspicious, of the movement because of my time in Israel. And I was like, I don't trust any of you. And then I kind of leave the church. I just step back. I kind of do what you did, where I took a pause. And that pause really exposed everything to me. And I was in New York City at the time. I was going to Hillsong.
Oh
And
wow. Was
so I
Carl
stepped,
Lentz your pastor? Oh
Carl Lentz
God.
was my pastor. And so I stepped back before the
You
Carl
should
Lentz,
write him a letter telling him character
right?
matters.
Excuse me, Carl. And then of course the whole church blames the woman he had an affair with, and like nothing about him. It's like
Wow.
she's this devil, deceitful seductress. Like
But that's
this whole
about
idea of
spirit.
like the men are supposed to be the ultimate leader, but they can't lead themselves thing. And I was like, and I mean, I left Liberty right before the pool scandal broke. Like I've had so many like pastors, youth pastors, like groom somebody in the church or cheat and not get in trouble with it. And then Carl Lentz for me was the last straw. I was like, that's
Dude.
enough. That's enough of that. I'm not doing this anymore.
Wow,
Um,
dude.
but
Yeah, I
yeah.
think
So
that for me there was like a breaking where I realized like because Trump, it's so off. Like it's so problematic that like it's almost like the extremity of who Trump is made me question the entire movement because it's like, oh, if you could miss this, like, listen, I don't consider myself the brightest bulb. I'm not the smartest guy ever. It took me a little while to see it myself. I wish I saw it sooner. I'm embarrassed for not coming to these realizations sooner. But like,
same.
Trump to me is this like, wee oh, wee oh, wee. It was like, you can't miss this shit. Listen, I don't know everything. I know one thing. And if I know one thing, it's that's a bad dude.
Like
Like,
that is a
he
bad
is
person.
bad. Like if I listen, I've never met Jesus. I don't know everything about Jesus. I don't have a monopoly on what Jesus feels about things, but I know Jesus is not Team Trump. I just know it.
Like
Like
just you can't be like you cannot
no.
be that horrible and hateful and selfish and then be like, oh yeah, Jesus is on board with this. And someone asked in the comments, you asked what the pool boy scandal was. Jerry Falwell Jr., so the
Oh
son
God.
of Jerry Sr., who was the president of the college at the time, it came out that he and his wife had had this multi-year affair with a pool boy where Jerry essentially was a cuck and the pool boy would sleep with Becky. And Jerry immediately threw Becky under the bus. Like it was Becky's fault. It's
Hey,
her
no kink
idea.
shaming, okay?
Like, no, and I'm not, for me,
We
it's like there's
welcome our
nothing
cuck
wrong with that,
community.
except for
Just
the fact that you
the
guys
hip
taught
hop.
at Liberty
I
where
know.
it was abstinence and you can't do this. And
Totally,
like,
dude.
if there were several girls who got pregnant in college and the girls got kicked out, the men got to stay. And like there was a big scandal with the hockey team assaulting a girl. No consequences. Absolutely zero. And
Man.
so I was when that came out, I'm like, you hypocritical, lying, sneaky sons of
Oh,
bitches.
it's
And then
all
like I
fake.
said,
And
like even if he would have come out and said, you know what, yep, this is what happened, but he immediately like takes his wife and just puts her under the bus, puts it
dude,
all on her. And then he was asked to step down, but I mean, it was not, in my opinion, nearly as big of a scandal as it should have been. And the fact that Christians are still sending their children there in droves
it's
after
insane.
and
And it tells
Jerry
you everything
Jerry
you need to
Senior was
know.
a nightmare too. Like
And so like, yeah, just like that. I mean, the that's another mask off one where it's like, this is really what it is. Like that's so it's no surprise that Jerry Falwell, of course, the first go round was one of the biggest Trump supporters because there is no spirituality to that man's Christianity. His Christianity is literally just a tool for power to
And
align with
money.
power and money. And so to me, it was like, oh, when I saw Trump for who it was this big glaring red alarm sign that I just could not miss. And it made me wonder, like, okay, if you don't have the moral discernment to see through this, because again, I don't know everything, but I know that's bad. And if you think that's good, in fact, he should be the president. In fact, like, he's the best. Like, this is one of our best presidents. I'm like, okay, wow. Your moral discernment is so far off the mark. Then it was like, well, what else? What else are you guys not telling me? Or what else are you lying to me about? Because I kind of did swallow this whole worldview that you gave me. And if that's where it led you, then maybe we need to question some fundamental fucking assumptions.
Well, and there's this whole thing about, again, this baseline of morality, and now, like, I mean, we now know, like, he's on the Epstein files. He's in the
There's
list. We know it.
666 people on this live. Oh, it's gone.
Yes.
Sorry.
I was
I
like,
just had
oh
to
my
call
god.
it out.
But
Sorry.
hail Satan. No, just kidding. But like, we know that he's there, and so one of the blessings of that has been anytime somebody who's like MAGA approaches me, the only word I have to say is Epstein, because I'm like, you are openly supporting a pedophile, and you think that you somehow have a moral stance. Like, I can't do that. Like, there's no way that you can rationalize that to me, and the excuses they make, and it's been this constant. And for me, it's almost like when you, as a, and I was very Christian nationalist, and when you hit that moment of understanding where there's one issue that breaks, where you're like, oh, you lied about that,
Mm,
then all the other issues start to fall like pretty quickly, and you realize, oh, this was all just made up. Like that, like not made up in the sense of like you didn't lie and make up stories about Jesus, but you
right.
lied about what this stands for. You lied about what you believe. You lied about your moral high ground. You lied about gay people. You lied about abortion. You lied about the fact that this to you is functionally all for money and power. And we see that in
Right.
Texas right now.
Yeah, that's the thing too. I realized like what it was for, like what evangelicalism existed for, like all the thing about conversion and really, I mean, to kind of come full circle to even like why I wrote my book Hellbent is that I was told it was all about saving people from hell, that it was all
Yep.
about conversion, it was all about saving souls. But the reality is, like, all of that is really just to get you to focus on the afterlife so that the rich and powerful can exploit this life. And that's not really our concern at all. Like, we're trying to build our Christian institutions, we're focused on saving souls. And then we'll pick Trump because he's the guy who's for Christians, right? He wants to put the Ten Commandments on the wall. Like, you literally are the biggest rube. Like, you'll fall for absolutely anything for somebody who just says, "Oh yeah, I'm with the Christians. I love the Christians. 2 Corinthians, my favorite book." You know, like you'll just fall for anything as long as he's your guy because you're not even invested in what actually is going to lead to the flourishing of this world. I didn't
Yep.
receive a politics that actually was grounded in what leads to the most good for the most people. That wasn't
I
even the
never, it was never even mentioned.
no.
And it becomes this conversation. And I mean, I know that like when I said the sinner's prayer at 5, it was because I was terrified of hell. Like I had hell nightmares. I would say the sinner's prayer like at least once a week just to make sure I was saved so that I wouldn't go to hell. And what I see now growing up is there's this preoccupation with what happens after you die to the point where you do not feel responsible at all to take care of the world around you. It's all about, oh, we're just thinking about the kingdom of God. I'm like, the kingdom of heaven is now. Hell is right now. Like, we can either create something better or something much, much worse. And consistently, conservatives, with all of their fiscal responsibility, are always choosing worse. And I would love to know. So you have Hellbent, your book, coming out in September. And I would love to know what started you on that book and on that topic, because I'm doing a Bible study on hell next week. And I've been getting so many messages and emails and questions of like, I am so scared to come to this study. It's terrified me my whole life. Like my parents scared me when I was little with hell. What
Yeah.
started you there, and kind of what were some of the things that you discovered?
Well, that's what started me was that was my introduction to God. And I think for many people, you met God. evangelicals talk a lot about a relationship with God, right? It's not a
Yeah.
religion, it's a relationship. For the vast majority of evangelicals and really just American Christians at large, that relationship with God began when you learned about hell,
Yeah.
really, of why you needed to enter into that relationship. The reason for the relationship, for most of us, you were told that there's a holy God and you're going to stand before that God and you deserve hell because you're a sinner. And when you die, the question is, like, was Jesus punished in your place or not? Was your faith in Jesus? Were you a Christian in whatever particular way? Were you born again? And if not, you were going to go to hell. So you needed to be in a relationship with God. The reason you needed to get right with God was so that God wouldn't punish you. And I learned about that when I was like 5 years old. And
Yep.
so God, the idea of God was inseparable from hell. Those two things were totally linked in most Christian minds. That's who God is. He's the one that you got to be right with so that you don't go to hell. And that's the whole ball game is really about.
Yep.
And a lot of this, I've realized, really just has to do with not understanding metaphors, and making everything woodenly literal and not recognizing that the kingdom of heaven, like this whole thing is about a spirituality for this life, for the sake of this world. And we did miss it completely. And as I wrestled with, my whole childhood in fundamentalism, I wrestled with assurance of faith. I was that kid who had to raise his hand every time, just in case, prayed another salvation prayer. The revival preachers got me every time because they would do the thing and then they would like say, after you prayed the prayer in your heart, if you prayed the prayer in your heart, you got to raise your hand. And I was like, oh shit. Like, I know that I raised it last week and I don't want everybody to see me raise it again because I'm the pastor's
Yeah.
kid, but
And there's all this internal conflict. And you're like, I also don't want to
dude.
lie because I did pray it.
Well, I would think, Jesus would want me to raise it. That's what I would think. like, like, I'm going to raise it again for Jesus.
For Jesus. It's for Jesus this time. And
Uh,
all of this fear and but one of the things I realized, so when I got older and like I ended up in two really abusive relationships. One was very physically abusive. The other one was just like catastrophic nightmare. But one of the things I realized is that, growing up in purity culture and you have this idea of, well, your only purpose as a woman is to be a wife and a mother. And I knew I didn't want kids when I was 12. Like I was sure, I knew, I was like, no, thanks. I always had an issue with how the
mm,
church treated women, but you can't question it because if you question it, you're questioning God and therefore you're sinning. But what I also realized was that this thinking that someone who loves me like God, because they show you this, they have a diagram that they show you that's it's an umbrella, like a series of umbrellas. And God is the big umbrella, and then it's the man who's the head of the household, and then it's the wife, then it's the children, then it's the pets. And that they're like, this is God's model
I
for the
don't know that
family.
mine had pets on it. You had the pets
Yeah.
version.
They like let us put pets on there because I was curious. And but I realized you grow up with this idea that like someone who loves you, unconditional love, would do anything for you. If you don't believe in him the way that these people are telling you, he is going to send you to a lake of fire forever. And when you get older and you start to dissect that, I'm like, if I have a partner and I say, oh my God, I love you conditionally, I would do anything for you, and then I say, but if you don't love me back, I'm going to set you on fire. That's an abusive relationship, is what that is.
Absolutely.
That's like a sociopathic, abusive relationship. And I think it, especially because of all of the things that women are taught in the circle, it creates this system of if he's cruel to me, if he beats me, if he cheats on me, I still have to love him. I still have to love him because that's how you're taught the
Right.
relationship with God is. And
Yeah.
then they tell you your relationship with your husband is a reflection of your relationship with God.
Well, all of love is shaped by that. That's the argument I make in the book. I talk about that exact thing that you just pointed out, and I make the point that this twists your very understanding of love. If God's love can include punishment, and if God is love, but then you have to say, well, we define love by who God is, not the other way around, right? So then,
Yeah.
okay, God is the one who damns not just some people, but actually most of the people who ever lived to hell. And
Yeah.
actually, really, I mean, according to some interpretations of the faith, even like rejoices in that because God is
Yeah.
holy and this is like a good thing. So that's what love is. So if that's what God's love is, that's what real love is, that's what our love can be like. So it's no surprise that Christians can be incredibly punishing and really call that love because they'll say, well, the love has to include the truth, right? And so this is why in the name of love, many parents cut out their own children, like when they come out as gay or invite their parents to their gay wedding and they say, I'm literally not going to come to your wedding because I love you. That
Yeah.
is learning a love that's been shaped really by hell, by a God who punishes. And
Yeah.
ultimately, the hell is like a trump card too, to say, well, I truly love you, and so I'm not going to support your lifestyle, which is going to lead you to hell. And if I were to come to your wedding, then that would be to sanction that, which is not loving, because that's going to damn you. And what's more loving than trying to save somebody from hell? And
Yep.
so hell really corrupts the very meaning of love. It ruins relationships. And so I tell people sometimes, because they'll ask, like, why are my parents being so cruel to me? But like based on their understanding, that is them trying to love you. But unfortunately, nothing fucks up love like a punishing hell-based spirituality.
Yeah. And it truly it creates this cycle of terror too. And you get into the weeds of like people who are, and we have a whole conversation on spanking, and that the couple that was like
Oh
rejoicing in
my
the idea of
God.
spanking their toddler. I was like,
It's gonna be hilarious.
it's gonna be hilarious. Pull him down. I'm like, why are you talking about pulling your toddler's pants down? Just like, she's literally a
Oh.
baby, and they're talking. It
I
was
feel
so
bad for, I mean,
disturbing.
what that tells me is that's what happened to him, right? Like
Yeah.
this is,
Well, and just it was the glee for me. Like, I understand being in the mindset. Like, a lot of people are like, well, the Bible says to spank your children. I'm like, that's not what it says. But I understand that
right.
you were taught that. But it was the glee with which he said that. And then you end up in these cycles. And I was in one of them growing up. My dad took discipline way too fucking far. Way too far. And it was this idea of, if I punish you harder now, I'm going to save you from behavior that could send you to hell. Like, my dad beat me with a bullwhip. Like, at one point, he
I'm
he
so
beat my
sorry.
brother with a frozen hose. Like, but it was all based in this biblical idea of love is punishment and pain. Sometimes this hurts me more than it hurts you.
Oh yeah, I heard that line.
And then my dad's other thing was, when he would spank you with whatever implement was handy, you could not cry or scream, or he would spank you harder and longer. So like, you had to stand there and just thug it,
Dude,
and you
that's like
couldn't.
sadistic, man.
It's sadistic, but it was so
I'm so
justified in
sorry
our
that
church. And
happened to
there
you,
were so
Monty.
many, there were so many families who would do that, or like lock their kids in closets.
Holy
And it
shit.
was, and they would all justify it with this kind of violent rhetoric that really ultimately stems from hell. And my dad also like cut my siblings off, like half my siblings. If they disagreed with him on anything, he just wouldn't speak to them anymore. And his thing with me was, you can't talk to your birth mom, it's either her or me. You can't talk to your siblings because they're living in sin. And yeah.
Sorry, I was just saying something to one of my kids over here.
Like, oh, hello, child. Okay.
Yeah, I snuck into my room to get a charger or something. Can you just shut my
um
door? Okay, yeah, hi. You
what's
wanna,
up, buddy?
here, Rem, you can say hi.
Hi.
Hi. What's
Uh,
your name?
My name is Remy.
Nice to meet you, Remy. I like that shirt.
can you shut my door?
Thank you.
Dude, yeah, I mean, I was not, thankfully, my dad, as a fundamentalist, we were in circles where people acted like that. And my parents were, I was definitely spanked, all that, but it could have been a lot worse. And as I hear other people's stories, I recognize that I think my dad's temperament was a very kind one. And so he didn't tend towards some of that. Some of those ways of thinking, it's like it justifies the worst impulses of a violent temperament, right? And
Yes.
so for the people that were naturally had that proclivity, like it was like this gives you spiritual sanction to call your abuse love, to call your abuse holy, even.
Yeah.
And so thankfully I didn't have that experience. I had, the experience of somebody who I think if he had a better way of thinking about the world, he might have not been violent at all. And so it was a kind of the whole controlled spanking thing. But I was still given this very rigid framework that your disobedience is rebellion and it needs
Yep.
to be punished. And like
Yep.
really immediately too, like any kind of delayed obedience is disobedience. And so for me, there was this thought that even like any kind of inability to like respond well to authority was seen as like, because you're breaking with that hierarchy and it really needs to be punished. And for me and my parenting with my kids, it was very hard to break with that because my own inner child that they would do something that like I would have been punished for as a kid, and in
Yep.
my mind it's like that is rebellion, it needs to be punished. And I would have this whole sense of like, well, I was punished for that. Guys, y'all got to get out of here. Goodbye.
Amazing.
Uh, and I would have to really talk myself through that, especially once I began to deconstruct stuff. I have had to repent to my kids because I did spank them for the first few years of their lives. before I really began to wrestle with it in my exodus from evangelicalism. We were in a world where that was the loving thing to do. It's actually not. I was really told that it was not loving to your kids if you didn't spank them,
Yep.
because you're really enabling them. They're going to be like, Verusha Salt in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. They're going to be spoiled and entitled and rotten. And you don't want that. Like, that would be bad for them, right? So you've got to spank that rebellion out of them. And a
Yep.
lot of that was rooted in this idea that our kids are fundamentally bad.
Yep.
And
That
so,
you're
yeah,
born evil and you're
dude.
fundamentally wrong. And in my house too, you talk about the whole like delayed obedience is rebellion. And also in my house, like questions were a form of delayed obedience. And that was the same in my church, that like if you questioned dad or you questioned the pastor, you were questioning the very will of God. And so you create this whole system of like guilt, shame, something doesn't feel right, but you can't ask questions because then that's rebellion and you're trying so good to avoid hell. It's an insane cycle once you get out of it and you can see it. But when you're in it, you're just like, okay, this is normal. This is what we're doing here.
Well, not only is it normal, that's the essence of what spirituality is. And this
Yep.
is really what I felt when I came to writing my book. I realized that if you took hell out of my Christianity, like, did I even have a Christianity left? The whole thing was kind of about punishment, top to bottom. My relationship to God was rooted in being on the right side of a punisher so that I didn't get punished. My relationship to myself was that I was a sinner born worthy of hell and really had to repent my guts out. My relationship with other people was one of superiority and a sense of I had to convert you to my religion. You have to believe like me or else you're going to go to hell. And for me, growing up in fundamentalism, being reminded of hell constantly, the most spiritual thing I could do is to warn somebody about hell. That was an act of spirituality. And now I can see that the very things that I considered spiritual, telling somebody, about Jesus to convert them, feeling horrible about myself and, repenting my guts out and that sort of thing. All of those spiritual, like, were actually alienating. They were the
Yeah.
opposite of true spirituality. And
Yeah.
so when that to kind of come back to the question you asked a little while ago of where the book came from, as I deconstructed this, I realized that I wasn't just saying, "Oh, the Bible teaches some different things about hell that I didn't realize before," and I'm interested in that. It was really getting a whole new foundation of my entire spirituality, uprooting
Yeah.
punishment from the whole thing. Because when you start to pull that thread, it's like the whole sweater of Christianity starts to unravel. And whenever I would talk about the fact that the Bible doesn't say what you think it says about hell, I don't believe Jesus talks about the kind of hell that we talk about. I believe he's using a metaphor for natural
Yeah.
consequences in
And
this
there's
life.
no like biblical like context to create the hell that we were taught. It just
No.
isn't there.
Well, it's apocalyptic hyperbole that gets read into it's taking hyperbolic apocalyptic images and making them woodenly literal and beating people over the head with it. And
Well,
when I
and those same
realized,
passages, all the other apocalyptic imagery is taught as imagery. Oh, this is just an image. This was a vision he saw.
totally,
He saw this cherubim and this angel. But
right,
that one
one
thing, well,
thing.
this one
Well,
thing
so,
out of this
right.
series of chapters is the
Yeah.
only literal thing.
And so, but I realized though that, like, it was more than just reframing what the Bible says about it. It was actually going soup to nuts, like, okay, but if not that, then we have to think about what is our spirituality, what was the message of Jesus if it wasn't escaping from hell. And you've alluded to it already. You mentioned the kingdom of God. And for some people, when you believe in hell, there is nothing more important than not going there. And here's the thing: if hell is real, then this life doesn't really matter. This world doesn't really matter. Yes, the only thing that really matters is believing the right thing and making sure that you don't go to hell. But if that's not what this is all about, then we are missing the thing that actually matters, which is how we live in this world. And to me,
Yep.
spirituality is not some bloodless thing. It is connected to how we live, the kind of societies that we build, whether or not we're going to have a planet Earth for our great grandchildren.
Yep.
Spirituality is about all of that. And
Yep.
we learned a spirituality that had nothing to do with the stuff that actually matters for life.
Yep. For
And so I want it
right
back because
here.
Jesus was about life.
Yes, about like what you do now, love your neighbor, and like and Jesus dove into like like people's thoughts. Like, no, it's not enough that you're not sleeping with this woman who's married to someone else. If you're thinking it, you're going the wrong way. And the pro-natalist portion of Christian nationalism is like, we need to have as many babies as we can, so Christians can rule the world. And they take it from the command to fill the earth, like to, but it's like, We already did that. Check mark. Like, done. We've achieved command. But then there's absolutely no response to the biblical calls for stewardship,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
to
we're in a
take
state of
care of
overshoot.
things.
Scientists will tell us, we are currently extracting more resources from the earth than it creates. In other words, what we are doing scientifically is just unsustainable. Something has to change. I mean, if
Yep.
we keep doing what we are doing, it is an apocalyptic scenario. Like we are actually going to create hell on earth
Yeah.
unless we repent. Like
Yeah.
then
Unless
all of a
we
sudden
pivot.
some of that language starts to make sense again. Like, oh my God, yeah, we do need to repent. The way we live in this world is fucking crazy. Like
Yep.
we're
It's
literally
insane.
in the richest country that's ever existed in the history of the world, and yet we spend more money on bombs than healthcare. Right? We're underinsured. People are our life expectancy is lower than many other countries. Meanwhile, we are funding a genocide. Yeah,
Yep.
I think we should repent, or else we are in fact going to go to hell, to use Jesus's sort of apocalyptic metaphor.
Like literally, and it's also this, like it's just, and it's right there, it's right in front of their faces, and it just doesn't matter because for them it's not about this life. It's just none of this matters. And it's like, yeah, like everything that Christ taught, and even like Paul believed that the kingdom of heaven was now, and that your focus should be on the now because God's coming back. Like, and this whole idea, especially around, they're freaking out about the birth rate. I'm like, maybe that's like an evolutionary correction to let the earth recover a little bit.
It'll
Bring
come
the
back up if it needs
population
to come
down a
back up.
skosh.
Like we could
Like,
take a
that's
minute.
just
We
too
can change.
rational.
What they can't fathom is that maybe we need to change the way that we're doing things in this world. And really, it's like capitalism is the god that cannot be questioned by a lot of these people.
Yeah.
I really think, for me, deconstruction of Christian, of some of my evangelical beliefs and fundamentalist Christianity is one thing. And I think a lot of people take some of that apart, but I think you've got to keep going and begin to deconstruct things like American exceptionalism
Yep.
and that myth of of capitalism being a global good. I mean, we really were told some things that we were indoctrinated just every bit as much as I was told that there's like a holy God and I'm a sinner. I was told that America's the greatest country
Oh,
that
yeah.
ever was.
Like, America's the greatest country that ever existed. And the only reason that we're great is because we were founded as a Christian nation. Not true. And all of the weight of America's success falls on it's Christianity and this American exceptionalism. Because yeah, that's where you get into this rhetoric that we're seeing in the Trump administration of slavery just wasn't that bad. America's so exceptional. It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't great, but it wasn't that. And I was like, have you like
Mm,
read a book about chattel
mm,
slavery? But we were told all these things, that everything America's ever done, like we were the heroes in World War II when we had a huge population of Nazi sympathizers here. And we refused to go to war against the Nazis until we were attacked. Then you get into like the Tuskegee Institute study, and you get into all of these other things that we've done throughout history. But I didn't know any of that growing up because it was all American exceptionalism, and it was this whole thing of like capitalism is king, and that's why from the time you're 3, they tell you, oh, like Republicans are fiscally responsible. They're not. They overspend consistently. They're the worst with the budget, but they don't use the money to take care of people.
right.
Like, because
No,
why do
because
that?
war is expensive, and evangelicals have never met a war they didn't like.
Yeah, they do
They'll
like,
pay
because
for
don't you know
anybody's
it's gonna
war,
make
dude.
Jesus come back sooner?
Right. Somebody just asked, I thought, an interesting question. Oh shoot, where did it go? They said, do you deal with the shame factor of changing your beliefs? Did you ever wrestle with that shame? And I'm assuming that means like shame from having held those beliefs. I don't know. There's different levels of shame. And I thought, I'll just answer that just really quick. I don't know if you have something to say about that, but I think for me, I did feel a little embarrassed, especially how quickly I became affirming when I stepped down. And until I stepped down, it was kind of in the back of my head that I wanted to wrestle with that more. But it was almost like I put a pin in it because I was in this institution where I couldn't really challenge that, or I would be forced out. I would have to resign. And I am a little embarrassed at how I can see that institutional pressure kept me from going where my intuition and really conscience was leading me, which was
Yeah.
towards LGBT affirmation. But at the same time, No, I think because that's just how people work, and I can see those pressures at work in all other kinds of people. That's what holds the thing in place. The system is designed to protect itself, and I'm just proud of myself for getting out of it and being able to question any of it at all. And I consider myself still on that journey, and I'm sure I'll be embarrassed about ways that I'm being right now at some point in the future. But I try not to hold shame for any of those changes. For me now, I don't put a flag in the ground and say, I have now arrived, deconstruction over, I believe all the right
Complete.
things, that I got all the new dogmas in place. Like, not at all. For me, what I've embraced is not a new set of rigid beliefs, but rather to embrace a sense of fluidity and the knowledge that I will continue to evolve for the rest of my life. And that's okay, because the point isn't getting everything right, because God's not going to punish us for getting something wrong. The point is striving to become the most loving that we can be.
Yeah. And I did have a few like layers of shame that happened. Like the hardest thing for me to overcome in my deconstruction was purity culture.
Yeah.
It was really, that was just something that was so deeply ingrained. And I mean, growing up, the most horrific thing that you could do as a young woman is get pregnant. I remember I had pregnancy nightmares, and I remember telling friends, and I talked to April LaJoy about this, and we both had the same experience, that we would rather tell our parents we killed someone than pregnant, because it was so shameful, and it was all these things. So that really messed up my sexuality when I got older, because I just could not connect physically. Just, I couldn't do it. It would make me sick. I had a lot of shame there. And I had a lot of shame in deconstruction for a period of time around some of the beliefs I held, kind of what you talked about, like, because my family was super alt-right, stockpile arms against the government people. And so I was super like covert racist. And I didn't realize at the time I was, but I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I was arguing with people that the Civil War was about, like states' rights. Like I was one of those people.
Right.
I was like a Charlie Kirk kind of person. I'm like, oh God, but it's more embarrassing than it is anything else. And yes, someone said something about vaginismus. It's super common in women who grew up in purity culture, and it's literally the inability to have sex without pain, like physical
Oh,
pelvic pain. And so once I got through that, like I was able to work through the shame. And then I had this period, it wasn't really shame, but it was this period of fear when I realized that I was like, didn't believe like this whole host of things anymore. And this kind of, it was like a hell fear almost of like, oh my God, what's happening to me? Am I losing my faith? And I was just like, no, I'm just kind of leaving the hypocrisy and the hatred behind. Like,
yeah.
because I'm done with that. And the and the affirming the LGBTQ community just kind of came naturally with all of that. Because I'm like, I don't think that a good God, a just God, a God that says above all, love God, love your neighbor, wants me to hate these people he made.
Yeah,
That doesn't make sense.
totally.
But that was
And
another thing in my family. Like you could be the most wicked, evil, cheat on your wife, whatever, but at least you weren't gay. And I'm like, you people like are so able to morally negotiate with the text whenever it's
right.
convenient for you. Like
I,
I'm done. Like I'm
I
gonna
will
be over
say, like,
here.
when I was a pastor and I was not affirming during that time, I had what I considered to be a more compassionate position. I certainly would when it came up, my emphasis would always be like all sexual sin is the same, and actually we should talk more about straight people's sexual sin than gay. Like I would do that whole thing, but
Yeah,
because I could feel that it felt wrong to not fully affirm people. So I was trying to be the most compassionate version of this bad belief that I had
yeah,
to be non affirming, because I felt trapped by the Bible. I felt like I needed to obviously trust God and love God and put God first, and that meant even the parts of the Bible that I didn't like. And I think a lot of people are in that space where they feel kind of trapped. And that's really what inerrancy is often used for. It really is just a weapon to trap people from listening to their intuition, because the Bible's not actually clear about a lot of that stuff, but there are enough verses that then get really emphasized to the point where it's like, no, 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 if you reject this idea, this concept, then you're rejecting the Bible itself, which means you're rejecting God.
yeah,
And they're not really, I think when you go deeper, I don't think that the Bible is actually slam dunk clear about saying really anything about gay people. But even if it was, I no longer have an inerrantist position where I don't feel like I have to shut down my experience, my intuition. Now we have decades of sex research and data that the authors of the New Testament did not have. I'm sorry, like even if he meant that, Paul doesn't know anything about homosexuality or how it affected people or how it leads to flourishing to put people in affirming communities versus non-affirming communities. And you know what Jesus cared about? Jesus didn't care about religious rules. Even if the New Testament still has a religious rule about homosexuality, Jesus' whole thing was putting people before religious rules. Oh,
All the
man
time.
is not made for the Sabbath is made for man. Any rules about sex in the Bible are not, we're not made for those rules. Those only serve flourishing. And so if the data is saying that non-affirming environments lead to death, suicide, depression, bad mental health outcomes, then actually, I think the most Jesus-like thing to do is to listen to sex researchers, listen to what the data is saying that leads to wholeness.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And also again, because we see, this, I did my first Bible study on like inerrancy and univocality that does not exist in the Bible. And those just mean the claims that the Bible has no mistakes, no contradictions, and that all these different authors over the span of 1500 years wrote with the same voice. There is no evidence for either of those things, and we can find problems in the Bible. But the same people that are grabbing the Bible to say gay people are now that when gay marriage was passed and the sky didn't fall, they moved the window to trans people, right? They moved the window over. But they grabbed the Bible with that, and I'm like, we don't believe, well, some people do, obviously, but we don't believe that women are property. We don't believe that a rapist can rape somebody and then just force them to marry them. We don't believe in like it's a sin to wear mixed cloth. Like you've been able to negotiate all these other things away because you understand this was an ancient, very patriarchal, often abusive society. It was a small tribe fighting for survival. And we know better now. Like, is there a better explanation? These people also thought the earth was flat. Like,
Well,
we
to
can
me,
acknowledge them and also acknowledge their limitations.
absolutely. And to me, like, as well, seeing with Jesus as my homeboy, like, I still find Jesus to be a spiritual figure worth emulating. And Jesus brought everything back to love. Every time it came up, like, well, what's the whole thing about? What's the whole Bible about? What's spirituality about? What does God really want from us? Like, if you could, like, soup to nuts, like, just give it to me. Like, what's the main idea? It was always love. Love God and neighbor. And also the golden rule, which is essentially a call to love that goes to a place of empathy, of doing to others what you'd have them do unto you. That is what Jesus said, all of those rules, that's what they're about. And so when one of the rules is not leading to love, leading into that kind of empathy, you're supposed to, and the early church did this. They had to. They didn't have Jesus around anymore, but then they were immediately forced to, are we going to make Gentiles get circumcised? Do they have to convert? We took a universalistic religion that said, no, Gentiles don't need to convert. We don't need people to convert. This is about faith working through love. Circumcision counts for nothing, Paul said. We took a religion that was founded on, this is all about love, not about religious rules. And we added new religious rules to do the gatekeeping when the first iteration of this was all about universalism. Peter was like, I can't possibly eat with a Gentile. They eat unclean food. And God is like, don't you dare call anyone unclean. No, and Peter comes in and says to a Roman centurion, God has taught me that no one is impure or unclean. That's a Bible verse, that no one is impure or unclean. That's what God taught Peter. Meanwhile, I grew up being told that gay people were impure, that Catholics were unsaved, that I was unclean when I had sexual thoughts, like all these things. We focused on totally the wrong thing. We missed the entire point of the gospel,
Yeah.
I would say.
The whole point. The whole point. And also like, even like you talk about like, oh, if I had sexual thoughts, I'm evil, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, oh my God, if I have this very natural urge that exists in animal species, I'm somehow evil. I'm depraved. I'm like, versus it being, hey, this is natural. If you have questions, come talk to us about it. And it was Jesus's refusal to align with these religious rules that we've now reinstated that got him killed in the first place. Like, that was the whole reason. The only people that he ever reprimanded and said, you snakes, you liars, you this, you that, was the most religious people
Totally.
of the time, the people that knew all this, and it's insane to me. And that's another thing that I look back on when I was because I had to overcome a lot of transphobia. That was a big thing for me. And it wasn't until later in my journey, because again, they moved the Overton window, right? It was gay people. And then when they're realizing, oh, the culture's like becoming more accepting, they had to pick a new group to pick on. And I had a really hard time with that because I had all this shame It was my shame. It wasn't their shame. It was my shame around like strict gender roles. And again, that I'm like, it's the world is going to collapse if we don't adhere to these gender roles with a male head of household. And one of the things that was a big game changer for me was really sitting with this idea of people over rules, but also this idea of, and it just transformed it for me because again, I was sucked into the conversations about, men and women's sports, which is not an issue. They don't give a shit about women's sports because if they did, they would pay them fairly. Like they don't care.
Right.
And they're
All of that
writing
is said
laws
by
that will
people who
allow
have never
any
watched a women's sport in their
right
fucking
ever.
lives.
I'm like, who's Caitlin Clark? Oh, you don't know? Bye. But they're writing laws that allow for any man or any person to stop a woman on the way to the bathroom and confront her if she doesn't look like they think a woman should look. Is like they were writing a law and it didn't, thank God, didn't get through the Senate, but it would have allowed for high school staff to like physically examine female athletes that were questionable, which is going to be tall girls, girls that look androgynous. It's going to disproportionately affect women of color because they're bigger and faster and stronger in athletics.
Insane, dude.
And
To think
so
that any boy would purposefully like pose as a girl just to get a leg up in sports. It's like, have you ever met a boy? Like, this is
ever,
not what
like
straight
that's not
cis
how that
boys are
works.
doing. Like, what are you talking about? What world are you fucking living in? Like, just so they could get a glimpse at a naked girl in a locker room, they're living this entire life as a trans girl. Like, they're hated by literally all of their friends because people are homophobic as fuck and transphobic as fuck. So literally, you're losing all the admiration of your peers. Everybody hates you. Also, you could get a sneak in a locker room or have a leg up in sports. That is not a thing. Nobody's
It's
doing that.
insane. And
Nobody.
also the group, I can't remember what the group's name is, but they were like the group trying to get, like trans people banned in sports. They found all in the entire country, K through 12, 5 confirmed trans athletes in female sports. It's not a real problem. It's a fucking, like, you're making it up. It's not a real
All of them
issue.
are. I mean, every problem. That's what scapegoats are. They're made up enemies, and it's happened throughout history. That's Renee Girard talks about this is scapegoat theory, and a group, the in-group creates an enemy that doesn't exist. It's always fucking fake. The immigrants
Yep.
coming to steal the jobs that are all rapists. Nope, actually, the data says that immigrants commit crimes at a lower rate than the general population, including undocumented immigrants. They commit less crimes than the general population. This is a fake thing. It's always fake. When the Nazis hated the Jews, it was for fake reasons. That's what you do with a scapegoat, and it's always somebody that you can pick on, somebody that can bully, a minority that doesn't have a lot of social power, so that you
Yep.
can load the fears of the population onto them and crucify them
Yep.
to sort of atone for the guilt of the community. And now we feel good, and we've created a bit
Like
of a
we've
unity.
cleaned up the streets. But for me, it was the first thing that really changed for me was like when I really started thinking about like the injustice of the church towards women, how they enable abuse, they cover for pedophiles all the time. They like marry off these young girls to like severely adult men who have groomed them since they were their youth pastor. And when I started to face that, what I was so thankful for this moment, I had this moment of why would someone born biologically male, especially a white biological male, give up all of the advantage of a world that is built for you? It is built for you. It is built for your advantage. It is built to favor you. This whole system is. Why would you willingly give that up? Not to dress up like a woman, but to be one. To live the experience of a woman. Because we as women know what it's like. We know what sexual harassment is like. We know what it's like to be talked over at our jobs. We know what it's like to be called a bitch if you're assertive or you won't let someone cross a boundary. We know what it's like to experience abuse, and you can't go to the cops because they don't give a shit. And I'm like, why would someone give up, like choose to live that experience if they didn't have to, if that's not who they are? There's no way, just like you said, there's no way you're going to go through all of that so that you can see a titty in a locker room. Besides, all the pastors and the Republican politicians are doing that already. Like, we don't need to like witch hunt for them. And
Absolutely.
that moment of clarity was huge for me
And
in
that's
my
what I think.
understanding.
I think I've realized that like that's always going to be shifting. Like that there will always be a scapegoated community,
Yep.
whether it's Mexican immigrants, whether it's queer people in general, whether it's trans people in particular or some other ethnic group. And for me, that's part of what does it mean for me to follow Jesus? It means to stand with the people that our society is crucifying. It's like, if you're going to put them on a cross, you're going to have to put me up with them. Like, that to me is like, that's the most Christ-like thing that we can do. And unfortunately, though, in our country, much of Christianity is actually at fault with standing with the empire rather than the scapegoats. And it's a voice to amplify power, and really it's a tool used by power to baptize their scapegoating, to sort of sanctify their violence, at home and abroad, honestly. And so evangelicals, they're the biggest rubes. They're literally just used by who's in power to sanctify violence at home and abroad, scapegoating at home and abroad, so that powerful people can continue to exploit those without power. And to be a true Christ follower, not a Christian, I won't say, because I think Christianity, I don't defend Christianity. I don't say, well, they're not real Christians. Actually, unfortunately, most of Christianity has done exactly this. But I think to say you're a real follower of Jesus, that you're trying to do what Jesus didn't do that. Christianity has done that throughout history, but Jesus didn't do that. And I think that that's where one thing I think we can do, like, is continue to say, like, okay, you can do that, but that doesn't look like Jesus, and Jesus doesn't want anything to do with it. And if you want to follow Jesus, it's going to look like doing the exact opposite of that, really. And always standing with whoever the least of these happens to be.
Well, and to the comment, some people commented about this issue, that specifically with the, again, you can see that it's a scapegoat, because when they're having this conversation about, trans athletes, again, which is very rare, it's exceptionally rare, but it's only female sports. It's never about men's sports, keeping things fair and safe. And it should be, if it's a question of safety, it should be across the board. It's a matter of policing how women show up. Like, are you feminine enough? Because that's what the conversation is. Because now we do have people who are queer or non-binary, or they just look androgynous, who are getting stopped and harassed for trying to use the bathroom and they are biological women. It's about policing female expression, because it's like, it's all about, like, it's the same reason that all of them hate my nose ring so much. This doesn't show up the way I think a woman should, or the way I'm attracted to a woman, so it's wrong. And it's really narrowed down to policing female expression and using a scapegoated group to be able to do that. Well, women should look like this. Well, if it's not safe, maybe you shouldn't play sports. Or like fucking Doug Wilson, we don't want women to vote. They're just vessels that, bring a body, or whatever it is he said. I'm like, listen, sir, I will
people that people come out of.
Oh, and it's just, and I mean, I grew up in a church they were like, well, we're not necessarily about taking women's right to vote away, but we do think household voting's better.
That is crazy. It's also super racist, because that whole household voting thing, this is coming from a man who defended the way households were set up in the antebellum South, where he said that race relations were never better than under chattel slavery in the South. And so that's really the setup that he likes. And it's like, the household really is a patriarchal white male who's in charge of not only the voting of the women in his charge, but also whatever minorities are there. That would be, I think, Doug Wilson's ultimate vision. And what's crazy is seeing how that, he was always fringe. Like, I knew of him when I was in evangelicalism. I didn't like him then. But the fact is, and here's what I'm constantly always saying to evangelicals, a lot of evangelicals will see something like that and say, well, I don't believe that. I don't think the majority of evangelicals think that women shouldn't have the right to vote. I don't think that that's a popular position. But what they're not doing is calling that shit out. What they're not doing is standing up against it and saying, oh my gosh, this is a real eye-opening moment here, that this is the direction we're going. Instead, it's actually causing them to defend things that are indefensible. And I'm sorry, but I don't know how the fuck. Like, there are a lot of evangelical pastors of mega churches, the Carl Lentzes of the world, Judah Smith, Rich Wilkerson, like, sort of big. These guys are not the Christian nationalists. They're not talking about we should take away women's right to vote necessarily. They're not saying that stuff. They're just doing their thing. They're big Sunday morning productions, but they never talk about what the bad things that the Christians in this society are actually doing. And how can you call yourself a spiritual leader right now if you're not standing up and shouting about this? Because we are in fascism, and it is specifically a Christo-fascism. It is Christianity and the American expression of it that has led us into this, and that is sacralizing it. And
Yep.
so if you are a Christian leader at any level, I'm sorry, but I'm past the point where I've got grace for you if you haven't spoken out yet. Like, okay, I do. I have grace for you. I do. And tomorrow's a new day. But like, guys, it's time to speak up. And I don't think you have to stand with me on every single issue to recognize that what's happening in this country in terms of nationalism and fascism is really against the spirit of Jesus.
Yeah. Well, and my thing, I'm at the point as well where, and I've always had a fighter temperament. I've always been a little bit more on the spicy side. That's kind of where my personality sits. I'm at a place where I'm like, if you claim to be a Christian, if you claim to be a moral person, if you claim to be all these things, and you're not saying anything, fuck you, you're lying. Because silence is complicity. You're being complicit. You're not confronting it. You're not standing up against it. And if you are just allowing evil to happen because it's inconvenient for you to tell the truth, I have no time for that. I have no time for that. I've been thinking a lot about John Brown lately. And I'm like, I mean,
Badass.
when you're like, and for those of you who don't know who John Brown is, he was a white abolitionist who thought that slavery would never end without bloodshed, and went on a cruise. He ended up killing a bunch of slave owners. He tried to rob an army fort by himself. He was executed. He was caught and executed. But the man had balls and he stood by what he believed, and he was not going to tolerate it happening. Like, he was so convicted and convinced of the evil of slavery, he was willing to fight against it. I think about him all the time. I think about him and I think about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I'm like, let's fucking go. Like,
Yeah.
let's go. I'm so sick of this shit, and I'm so sick of the silence of people that I know are not MAGA. I'm like, what
What
are
I
you
love
doing?
about John Brown as well is that he was explicitly motivated by his faith, by his
Yes.
Christianity as a follower of Jesus to stand up against slavery. For him, that's what Christianity was. Even
Yes.
though the majority, in fact, almost all of the slaveholders of the South were Christians, he was like, not my Jesus. And so I do think that one thing I really hate is that Christianity is a tool for the right. It is a tool for fascism and for the power structure to use, for empire to use. But they're misrepresenting it, and the left or progressives, people that actually they want to fight for liberation, not just domination, often shy away from using faith-based language. I'm not saying you have to pretend. If it's not your deal, it's not your deal. But a lot of them are Christians, and when they wade into it, I really think there's a lot of power there. And so I think it's important to bring that to the public square, because I mean, some of our the most powerful social movement ever in our country, the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King Jr., for arguably one of the biggest, most important, influential social leaders of all time, he explicitly used Christian language and was a Christian pastor as he fought for that. And it's because actually this does speak to the heart. This is a spiritual struggle. The
Yep.
spiritual struggle, our wrestle is not against flesh and blood. Amen, Paul. In other words, listen, these are forces that are beyond us. Not being about flesh and blood doesn't mean this is about the afterlife. No, no,
Yeah.
no. This is about right now, but it is spiritual. It's about the soul of our nation. Who are we as a people? Are we going to care about the least of these or not?
But it's about ideals and ideas and the things that they can create. Because, and I just did an interview with Dr. Randall Ballmer. He just released a book called America's Best Idea: The Separation of Church and State. And I wish I had it next to me. It's this teeny tiny little book, super easy. I read it in one sitting, but it covers the history of religious freedom and the intentional separation of church and state. But he is a expert in religion. Like, that is what his doctorate is in. He's also got, like, he's got a doctorate of divinity as well as history. And he said, when he was at Columbia and he ran their graduate program, he's like, myself and the other professors, we did research on religious fundamentalism. And he's like, we studied every group of religious fundamentalists, like Christians, Islam, Hindu. And he's like, they all have one singular thing in common, and that is the suppression of women.
Yeah.
Every single one. He's like, that's what makes them fundamentalists. And then they take these ideas, they repackage it into whatever scapegoat group that they're going to execute that on. And then they start doing the same thing. And every single fundamentalist group works the same way. And I had no idea. I was like, can you please send me that research? I am so interested. But it's this thing of like, for me, morally, I can't go to sleep at night feeling like I'm not doing enough. How in the flying batshit fuck can Christians sit on their asses in a church on Sunday and not say a damn word. That is mind blowing to me. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot grab that. I can't grab that and hold on to it.
That's why I had to go. I was just disgusted, man. I like 2020. I couldn't do it anymore. I was because I felt like I was just wringing them by the neck. I mean, it was my last straw was I preached a sermon on race during the summer, after of the George Floyd protests movement,
Yeah.
and I preached about white supremacy. And I honestly was like really trying to be winsome. I knew that this is all a bunch of white conservatives, and so I wasn't trying to frame it in an unpalatable way. I was really trying to give it to them in a way that they could understand. I wasn't trying to it wasn't a knockout blow. It was like kid gloves. And I still got all these angry emails, all these people that were so offended. Family left the church. People were sending me Candace Owen videos and John MacArthur videos and saying, "Here, let me help you. Here's a better way to understand it." And I was just like, I can't do this because I can't sit in another meeting and pretend to listen to you like your opinion is like worth listening to. I really just want to actually scream at you or tell you
Yeah.
that you're a fucking evil person. And it's like that's not going to be helpful. I just need to stop trying to change this thing from within because this is what it's for. I don't think you can change a system from within if the system exists for the purpose of suppressing marginalized people, women, queer people, creating a power structure and a hierarchy of domination and supporting that hierarchy. That's what it's for. That's what
Yep.
American evangelicalism is for. It exists to baptize and sacralize an American hierarchy of domination. And so, no, you can't
Exactly.
change
And
that
it's
from
like,
within.
it's this absolute stubborn refusal to face the plank in their own eye. Because, and one of the things I say, and I say this to like white evangelicals all the time, I'm like, the black church exists as proof of sins the white church will not repent for.
Totally.
They exist because you would not let a fellow believer sit with you because of the color of their skin, and your power structures have yet to openly repent of that. They
There's
won't do
never
it. They
been
won't face it because
reparations.
it's too convenient. It's too convenient. And because ultimately at the baseline, they don't give a shit about loving their neighbor. They care about power, they care about money, and they care about the hierarchy.
They
Because
also have an
otherwise you
over
would be doing things
spiritualized
so
view.
differently. What? Sorry?
Well, sorry, I was going to say they have a very over spiritualized view of repentance. It is
Yeah.
based on, well, I'm forgiven by God. Like we've asked forgiveness. Like a lot of these denominations have written statements on, oh, well, we're sorry about that or whatever. SBC has kind of apologized, but there hasn't been repair because they're
Yeah.
not focused on, well, what are we building? Is it leading to flourishing or has there been no change? Like, how can we actually be a part of repairing the solution? And so there's been no work for reparations. Um,
Oh
and
yeah, you
so,
can't
yeah.
say that word. They lose their shit.
Right.
Ask me
It's
how I know. So
so
before we
true.
wrap up, I do want let everybody know the name of your book and when it comes out.
Okay.
Look
Yes.
at the cover.
Ta-da. Ta-da. Hellbent, How the Fear of Hell Holds Christians Back from a Spirituality of Love. And it is more than just the fear, but that's, a punchy subtitle. But really, I think this whole framework of fear and punishment avoidance, and a focus on the afterlife rather than this life, um, it holds us back from a spirituality of love. I think that idea that the purpose of Christianity is to convert people to believe the right things, to go to heaven instead of hell, that it has robbed us of a true, meaningful spirituality. And it also is not anything like the spirituality of Jesus. It's not how Jesus showed up in the world.
Yeah.
And so for me, this book is about deconstructing hell and also reclaiming a spirituality that looks more like Jesus. And so I really hope it helps people. I try to be really practical. I want to help people actually move through even like some stuff that still lives in our bodies, because you can change your
Yes.
mind. You can leave fear-based religion. That it's much easier for you to leave fear-based religion than for fear-based religion to leave you. Like
Yes. And your
it haunts
body
you.
keeps the score. And like you have to do a lot of body work to get that shit out.
So I do provide some tools that could be helpful, but also I think it'll just be a helpful step for people. There'll be a study guide available as well if you want to grab some friends and work through it together. I think it'll be, yeah, really helpful for people. So it comes
I
out
love that. I
September
have
30th.
people that have been asking me about doing a book club. Maybe we'll do a book club since
Do
they're
a
studying.
book club. Oh, I'd love that. Yeah, I'll get you the study guide. Right now, I actually am forming a launch team. So if anybody out there is like, wow, that message really resonates with me, you can check my stories right now where you can apply to join my launch team. You just have to pre-order the book. And if you join the launch team, you'll actually get an advanced digital copy of the book. I will send that to you in the next
And
week or
it's so
so.
good, guys. I've read it. It's so good.
Cool. Thanks, Monty.
Oh yeah, I read it the week you sent it to me.
And yeah, so the folks that are able to read it early, the whole idea there is that they can like write a review and have that review ready for launch day and that sort of thing. So
That's
yeah, thanks for
awesome.
having this conversation with me,
Of
dude.
course. And obviously, everybody, so this is Brian Recker. You can find him at BE Recker on Instagram. But where else can they find you? What else are you up
Um,
to? Where
the
you living?
main two other things I want you to know about is I write on Substack, and so my Substack, the summer has been a little challenging, but I try to do a mixture of meditations on the life of Jesus and other Bible topics from a more progressive, inclusive standpoint for people that are hoping to reclaim some Bible. I write meditations. I also write some cultural and political commentary on my Substack. But the other thing that I would love to have and we should talk more about this later, but I'm also planning a gathering with some friends called the Ember Gathering, which you can also follow. The whole idea here is that for those of us who still long for spiritual connection, I don't think evangelicals own worship. They do worship music, but their worship is mostly about gatekeeping who's in and who's out. For
Yeah.
me, worship is about connecting with the God who is love. I also don't think they own discipleship because discipleship is about following the real Jesus, not some fake ass white Jesus. And so they
Yes.
have discipleship conferences and they have worship gatherings, but I don't think those things are truly representative of what worship really is or what discipleship really is. And so I don't want them to just have those things. And for those of us who are still longing to gather with other people who want to follow Jesus, but we don't know how to label ourselves, we don't know if we're Christian, but we know we're against whatever's happening here with this Christian
I
nationalism
don't
thing.
that. Don't like that.
Yeah, so that's really, it's a gathering for people who want to still follow Jesus, but resist empire, but reclaim the sacred and a spirituality that still is, yeah, I think resonant and about connection, but doesn't ignore the injustice in the world. And so that is the Ember Gathering, which you can look up, and we're planning it for next February. Will be our first
Okay.
one, hopefully, if we sell enough tickets. Otherwise, maybe we'll have to move it. But this is a new experimental thing, and I'm really excited about it. But
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the live as part of my celebration that's going on for a few weeks.
congrats
And
again, friend. I'm
everybody,
really proud of you and really thankful for your voice.
thank you. I'm trying. Everybody make sure, like, what September, what day does it come out, your book?
September 30th. Pre-orders are super helpful for new authors like me. And so you can pre-order. I read the Audible, which was so fun, and I did preach a little. Like I was
Oh,
trying to read and go slow, but every once in a while I'd just start preaching.
you're
So
just
I
getting
think the
in
Audible will
there.
be a pretty fun experience, actually.
Okay, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. I'm so appreciative. I'm so proud of you and the work you've done. And thanks for being like someone who's helping heal the world.
Thanks, Monty. You too. Let's talk again. You're a good person.
I try. I do try. All right, take care.
Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.